All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining in this morning. My name is Kirsty Burnett. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Administration here at the Charles County Charitable Trust. This orientation this morning is to discuss the American Rescue Plan Act Round 2. Grants that just opened last week and it's going to be closing October 3rd. I will pause a few times during the conversation here to take some questions that you guys may have. If you have a question and you want to put it in the chat, Jessica Richards, our administrative assistant, will be monitoring the chat for us. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, I'm just making sure everybody can see this shared screen that I have up here. Okay. Good morning for anybody who's just joining in. If you want to go ahead and just make sure you're muted. That way there's no distractions as we're rolling through this. So again, this is the American Rescue Plan Act grant. This is round 2 that the Charitable Trust is doing. We did a round in January of this year of the same funding. This grant is very similar to the last round that we did. Same criteria. So we're going to just go ahead and roll through it here. So to access the grants, you're going to go on to the Charitable Trust website page to grants, and you'll see American Rescue Plan Act. So the deadline for grants is October 3rd, 2022. And the grant deadline will be at midnight on October 23rd. I'm sorry, October 3rd. I know a few of you had asked the timing for that. So the Charitable Trust has $500,000 in available funds for nonprofit organizations serving Charles County. And they are provided through the American Rescue Plan Act. So the purpose of the funds is to provide grants to nonprofits in response to COVID-19 or the negative impact of the pandemic, covering a broad range of services, including workers responding to COVID-19 emergency, premium pay, training, work incentives, and reimbursed expenses from March 3rd, 2021 through January 31st, 2023, as long as the expenses have not already been supported by other COVID relief funding. So essentially, we can't double dip in funding. If you've already received a grant to cover it, you can't also apply for additional funding. An exception to that could be if you applied for reimbursed expenses and you had $100,000 in expenses and you received a reimbursement for $25,000, you still have that extra additional funding that has not been reimbursed. You could apply for the same thing. And funds must be expended no later than December 3rd, 2023. So it's a little over a year out. We do request, if you are requesting for anticipated funding loss, that you have good documentation to support the funding loss that you're expecting. So key dates here is the application deadline is October 3rd. Notification of awards will be in December 2022, and payments will start to be made in January 2023. Maximum grant amount for this cycle is $25,000. That is a change from our round 1 of funding. Round 1 had a higher maximum grant amount. So our eligibility criteria is you have to be an IRS recognition as a 501c3 tax exempt organization with status no later than October 3rd, 2021. And you have to be in continuous operation since October 3rd, 2021, and be in good standing with the state of Maryland. As part of being in good standing with the state of Maryland, you do have to provide a certificate of good standing from the state of Maryland. Those certificates are good for 1 year. So if you have applied for a grant recently, whether it was the American Rescue Plan Act Round 1 or our fiscal year grants, and you provided that, that same certificate should still be good now. So there's no need to get another one. If you do not have one, we do have a link to the certificate of good standing link with the state of Maryland in our application. If you click on that link, and I believe it's around $20 to get a new certificate. So the criteria for the use of funds is listed here on our website. This may be a form that you go back to several times, this and the application instructions, while you are filling out your grant. You may not know which category you're falling into or which one you should apply for. So if you just revert back to here, it'll kind of give you direction as you move forward. So category A is net revenue loss for the period of March 3rd, 2021 through January 31st, 2023, that's not covered by other revenue sources. And category B is expenses directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic between March 3rd, 2021 and December 3rd, 2023. So those dates are important because March 3rd, 2021 is when the American Rescue Plan Act was passed. So those are expenses related to that. The only exception to that would be for premium pay for eligible workers is reimbursed retroactively to March 1st, 2020. In premium pay, you do have to provide documentation for that, but that could be up to $13 an hour in addition to what the employee's regular salary was. So the expenses for category B include COVID-19 mitigation and prevention, assistance to household, educational disparities, mental health services, organizational workforce assistance, assistance to unemployed workers, technical assistance, preventing and responding to violence, homelessness, and capital expenditures. I did want to make a note here. The health department will also be having American Rescue Plan Act grant that's covering mental health services. If you are applying for funding through the charitable trust for mental health services, you cannot apply for those same funds through the health department's grant when they do open that. So to discuss the evaluation criteria and how the charitable trust reviews and scores applications, once applications are submitted by the nonprofits, you will receive a copy of your application, and the charitable trust staff review applications to ensure that they're completed correctly and all required documentation is submitted and correct and it fits the eligibility criteria. After that, a small panel of the charitable trust board of directors will be reviewing and scoring the applications, followed by the full board review of applications and scoring. Their recommendations for awards are then sent to the county for approval, and the recipients are then notified, which would be in December. So some of the things that they're looking for when they're reviewing it is evidence of net revenue loss caused by the pandemic. So if you are applying for net revenue loss, we need to see financials for the full year prior to the pandemic or full year prior to when you're submitting for net revenue loss to show clear explanation of need and purpose. For category B, is the more information that you can provide to determine the need for funding is the easier it is when the panel is reviewing the applications. So your goals, objectives, and outcomes are clearly defined. If you are an organization that serves multiple counties, you're only including information relatable to Charles County and how the funds will affect Charles County residents. Potential impact of the programs on the quality of lives for underserved populations, such as those living in poverty, low-income households, and those experiencing hardship because of unemployment during the pandemic, and individuals with disabilities. If you are forming a partnership with another organization to better target services and improve programs, this is a question that has come up previously. There are sometimes two organizations who are working together for one common goal, and they're asking, do we both apply for the same funds? The answer to that is one organization would apply to represent both, and you would work it out between the two organizations, how the funds would be handled. We would reward funding to the one who takes the lead on the application, but your documentation would have to show how you're working together. I can stop right here if we have any questions about just the general overview or the evaluation process before I go into the application instructions. I also have Jessica monitoring the chat if there's any questions in the chat.
Chrissy, we have a question. Can you explain the eligible capital expenses under category B?
For capital expenditures, we can go into that. I believe that may be mentioned in more detail in the application instructions. So the application instructions here, as you log into the grant portal to apply and you're filling in the application, this is another form. I know I mentioned you'll be going into the previous screen, but the application instructions also have more detailed layout of what you need for your application. A suggestion that we have while you're filling in your application is to download the blank application and fill out your application in a Word document, and then copy and paste those answers into your application. It's a little bit easier to follow and to double check it that way. That said, if you do bold, italics, bullets, anything like that, that will not transfer over to your application. That can't be added back in. So it's important to describe in your narrative in as much detail as you can in the characters provided, what your funding is for and how it will impact Charles County residents. There is a way to save your application as you're moving along to come back to it. And when you click to save it, it will email you a copy of your application in progress, and you can use that link to go back to it. Some documents that you will need to upload into your application: IRS letter of determination, your FY22 profit and loss, your FY23 operating budget, and your most recent 990. I've had a few questions about operating budget and their P&L. Those are required for all organizations submitting a grant. There's no exception. That is required documentation to apply for the grant. If your fiscal year is starts in July, then it would be as of July. There's a few organizations I've talked with that have their year start either January or October. Wherever your most recent year started is the documentation that you'll need to provide. If you do have a question on what documentation, please feel free to call or email me and I can answer it more directly with you. All right, so grant awards may only be used to serve Charles County residents. I believe I've said it before, but it's worth reiterating. So if you are a national or tri-county or state organization, submit local financials for Charles County only. And that is something, if you have questions about, feel free to call or email me, and I'm happy to work with you to make sure you're submitting the proper documentation. So grant request information. All requests must respond to COVID-19 or negative impact of the pandemic. That's the big overview umbrella to make sure that you're following as you're completing your grant. How does the funding I'm requesting directly relate to COVID-19 or negative impact of the pandemic? If your organization had to make changes, staffing, bring in additional programs, technology, anything that you had to do to pivot or adjust during the pandemic, that's what we need to see. So category A would be your net revenue loss from March 3rd, 2021 through January 31st, 2023, not covered by other sources. While applying for category A, you will be asked to upload up to 3 financial documents that provide evidence of net revenue loss. So in the application, there is the ability to upload 3 different areas. You may only have 1 document that you need to upload. That's fine. You don't have to upload 3, but there is the opportunity to upload 3 documents. For category B, which are expenses directly related to COVID-19 pandemic between March 3rd, 2021, and December 3rd, 2023. And Mike, this kind of goes back to your question with capital expenditures. Because the list of services the Treasury Department has identified is not exhausted and it has added additional services to the list. Basically, the intent of the fund is to serve populations and groups that were impacted disproportionately by the pandemic, and how the funds needed are in response to the pandemic. So COVID-19 mitigation and prevention, that could be vaccination programs, testing, additional supports that you've had to put in place, PPE, mitigation or other services for congregate living facilities like nursing homes, group living facilities, ventilation improvements, or physical plant changes to enable social distancing. Assistance to households, which would be food assistance, cash, burials, home repairs, weatherization, internet access, or job training to help unemployed workers find work. Something to add to this, we are not including assistance for rent or mortgage and utility assistance in this grant because that is being covered by another grant program in the county. That is something that was also in the last grant round that has continued over to this grant round. Educational disparities, early learning services, tutoring, home visiting, programs that address learning loss to keep students engaged, support for youth, mental health needs, summer camps, and foster youth services. Also category D, which is mental health services and substance abuse disorder services. I will reiterate here, there is another grant program that is not yet open through the health department to address mental health. It is okay if you apply for mental health services grants through the charitable trust. We just have to make sure you're not applying for the same grant through the health department when that grant opens. Organizational workforce assistance for nonprofits, where this includes payroll, cover benefit expenses, and premium pay for workers. If you have specific questions about does your organization qualify for premium pay, or where can the payroll benefits, back to work incentives, how can I apply them? Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can talk to you about those funds and how you can apply them to your application. But the bottom line is if you can relate COVID-19 to the reason why you need the additional funding or paid out the additional funding or had to do additional training, then that's how it will qualify. So assistance for unemployed workers, especially targeted to disadvantaged individuals or individuals from low income areas. This includes wraparound services, food, housing, healthcare. Technical assistance, which is technical assistance, counseling, or other services to assist with nonprofit organizational planning needs. Preventing and responding to violence. Homelessness, emergency programs and services for homeless individuals, including temporary residents. And capital expenditures are eligible expenses to those that respond to public health and economic impact designed to benefit impacted populations. Capital expenditures is a very wide, it's a very broad category. And if somebody has, I know we had one question about capital expenditures, and it's really if you can relate the need for the capital expenditures to responding to COVID-19. So maybe you had to add additional space to your building to be able to safely integrate your employees or the services back into your organization. If you can relate it back to COVID-19 as the reason for the expenditures or response to it or anticipation for the recovery part of the pandemic, then that would be included. Because it is so broad, it's hard to narrow down exactly what could be included for capital expenditures. In even all of the categories, we try to break down what could be covered, but it's so broad. There's hundreds of pages of the act to read through. So while it's broad, if you can narrow it down as best you can to responding to the pandemic and how it impacts Charles County residents. So that is the overview here of the application instructions and the criteria for the application here. I will stop to take a pause just to see if there's any questions that we have so far. There's something in the chat, Jessica.
Yeah.
Hold on, Jessica, you're muted. Still muted.
There we go.
Thank you.
Spacebar trick wasn't working for me this time. No, if you just want to reiterate, what if the organization's fiscal year 23 budget is not ready by the 10/3 deadline? I did answer in the chat,
yeah.
but
okay. That may be something you need to call me about directly. If your fiscal year starts on October 1st, maybe you wouldn't have it ready. But I would expect if your fiscal year started July 1st, that your budget would be in place already. So that may be something that we can discuss directly.
I think their fiscal year just starts in January.
January. It would be the last. So it would be January. It's 2022. So their 2023, if they start in January, is not. So they would include their January 2022 through December 2022.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions here so far?
Yes, there is one more, Christy. If you use the grant for staffing support during the pandemic, do the staff members have to be Charles County residents, or is it okay if they work with Charles County residents?
As long as it's in Charles County. So if they're working in the Charles County, if their work is in Charles County, directly benefiting Charles County residents. They don't have to specifically live in Charles County, but the impact of the grants has to support Charles County programs. And I would just make sure if you are an organization that is Tri-County, that you use the space provided in the application to really explain that in great detail. That way there's no questions left or the panel isn't wondering, well, how is that going to relate to it? The more clear you can be in your explanations, then the better it is when we're reviewing and we wouldn't have to come back with questions. Okay. Any other questions for now? Okay. So as you're going through the application, you would then click your apply now. And when you go to apply now, it will take you to the application. There's the opportunity here to download your blank application to fill out or reference back to as you're providing information in the actual portal. So you will have to create a username access to get into the portal here. And just important to reflect back to your eligibility requirements. The first questions in the application will be about your eligibility requirements. If you answer no to any of the requirements, you won't be able to proceed with the application. So that includes being a 501c3 by October 3rd, 2021, being in operation continuously since October 3rd, 2021, and being in good standing with the state of Maryland. You'll also have to supply your IRS determination letter, your certificate of good standing, your profit and loss statement, your budget, and your 990. There's also the program budget for the use of the ARPA grants that will be included in the application. So I have brought up a blank copy of the application here, which downloads it. So I'll just skim through the blank application here so everybody can see the layout of the application. If you have any questions, I'll stop at the end too for more questions. So these are the first three questions that you're asked. Are you 501c3? Have you been in operation and are you in good standing? If you answer no to any of those questions, you won't be able to proceed with the application. And that's something you can give me a call about to discuss if there's an issue with that. So you have to provide the name of your organization, just your general organization summary. How many individuals do you estimate your organization will serve this fiscal year? Just make sure as you're filling it out, if you're a tri-county state or a larger organization, you're including information just relatable for Charles County. So your grant request. So there is category A and category B grant request. You do not have to request funding for each category. You can request one, the other, or both. But it is important as you're putting in your grant request that you are reviewing what you're requesting. So if you're requesting $1,000 for category A and $1,000 for category B, then your total grant request is $2,000. That is something that became a little confusing the last grant cycle as we went through, and their total grant request in their application wasn't supporting what A and B were. So just make sure that you're clear and that your totals add up. So when the grant committee is reviewing, they know specifically what the funding is requested for. So in this case here, you'll have a place to request A, B, and both, but just a reminder, one or the other or both is acceptable. So for your category A, net revenue loss, you'll explain it and then upload supporting documentation for it. You're not requesting category A, you'll skip right through to category B. There are several categories in category B that you could be selecting from. You can select 1, 2, 3, you can select as many as you would like. You don't have to select just one category. It does give you the option to select more than one. If you're requesting funding for more than one, just make sure that you are clear in your narrative what you're requesting. So there's also the budget template that you'll need to fill out with the funding that you're requesting. Please be as clear as you can when you're filling out that budget template, what the funding is used for and how much. And I know I've said it several times, it's worth saying again, just make sure you use that budget narrative space to the best that you can and be as clear as you can about how the funding is responding to COVID-19 and how it's going to benefit citizens of Charles County. And then the organizational documentation that is provided here for you to upload. Those documents all need to be uploaded. You will not be able to submit your application without the proper documents uploaded. And then your organizational contact information. So if you need to stop or review your application before you submit, there is a button that will be at the bottom of your application that will be save and continue. And when you do save and continue, it emails you a link to your application so you can do a final review before you submit. Once you submit the application, you cannot go back in to make any changes. So make sure your final version is ready and complete before you submit. You will receive an email after you submit that has a copy of the full application you submitted. Just make sure everything on there after you receive it is correctly as you submitted it. If you have any questions, please feel free to call or email me after reviewing, and we can discuss any issues that you have at that time before the committee reviews. I did want to take a minute just to see if we had any questions after reviewing the application or the application process, if anybody had any questions as of now. And if Jessica, if you can also just check the chat for me.
Nothing in the chat right now.
Okay. You guys must be seasoned vets at this point. You just know what to do. I'd love to hear that. Well, I did want to take a minute to introduce one of our great partners, Michelle Sullivan. I see her on here from the College of Southern Maryland's Nonprofit Institute. Through talking with Michelle over the last few months, the Nonprofit Institute has been doing a lot of reading and reading the pages and pages of the American Rescue Plan Act and are very familiar with the requirements of the American Rescue Plan Act, the grant proposal process, and the fun financials that need to be submitted with the applications. One thing that we have learned is that we have a lot of really small, great organizations in Charles County that don't have the large manpower of going through financials and knowing that they're submitting the right thing. And as the charitable trust, we cannot go through that for you and provide the information that you need to submit. However, we have a great resource right here in our own backyard with the Nonprofit Institute, who can really help and is eager to help you guys submit great applications for review. So Michelle, if you'd like to introduce yourself and how you could help some of these fine nonprofits.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christy. So as Christy pointed out, the Nonprofit Institute is a central resource for the Tri-County area. And I know many of you that are on this call, but I don't know all of you. And we would love to be able to help you if you want to brainstorm, if there are things that you would like us to look at, or if we can help you in any way as you go through this process or any grant process. Really, our goal is to help you with a variety of things, whether it's board governance, whether it's grant writing, fundraising, marketing and advertising, your volunteer corps, whatever you may need. And we have a lot of affinity groups that are free. You are welcome to join those and get some deep, we take a deep dive into these varied areas. We also host a community call, which is for the whole Tri-County area. And oftentimes it's a great opportunity to see where partnerships may emerge. So we would welcome you on that as well. The best way to join all of these things is to make sure that you receive our Nonprofit Institute newsletter. That goes out once a week, and I apologize, that's my background. And that by joining that newsletter, you will get all of the links to these varied calls that we have. So I'm going to put my information in the chat. Please reach out to me with your email address if you'd like to join the newsletter or set up a call with me. I'd be happy to talk to any of you and really look forward to helping you in any way I can.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And she's been a great resource for the American Rescue Plan Act. And I hope that she's able to help some of you who have questions that you're just not sure where you can land. Well, I'm happy to help you as far as financials and things like that go. Michelle has proven to be a master of reviewing and is happy to help. So we're very happy to have that partnership really to just help make nonprofits in Charles County thrive. So that really is the overview of the American Rescue Plan Act grant, very similar to our previous round. I would like to suggest, now that we've already completed one round, the applicant recipients from our previous grant round are listed on our website under the impact page. So if you go on to impact on our website, the grant recipients from American Rescue Plan Act round 1 are listed there. So you can see who received grants and what their grants were for. And that may be a good way to help guide you through, well, they received that. Oh, I didn't know we could apply for that. And just kind of help you get a better understanding of grants that were awarded. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. I'm available by phone or email just about any time. And I'd rather you ask the questions and receive a little bit more clarity than trying to move forward in the application where you're just not really sure if you're moving forward in the right way. So I'm happy to take if there's any other questions. Jessica, if you can check and unmute yourself too.
Yes, I am just trying to pull the link for the budget template. That's the only question in the chat right now.
Yeah, let me see.
So I'm just about there.
Actually, I have it up right here. It's wrong one, but can we see this one on the screen here? So that's the program budget. That's in the application. You'll put your organization name, your program name, and then your project expenses. So your total program budget, the request from the Charles County Charitable Trust, and then the details here. So if this is anything that you have a question about as you're filling it out, feel free to reach out. You can also change the names of some of the category project expenses here. These are just general ones that we have in the template, but if you need to change that to fit the request of your organization, please feel free to do so. The more clarity you can provide on this, the easier it is when our team is reviewing those. Okay. I see Jessica put it in the chat as well. So thank you, Jessica. Okay. So we have any other questions here? Okay. Well, if you have any questions after today, please feel free to reach out by phone or email to me. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to talk about your individual organization. I also like to hear about the great things your organization is doing. I only see what I see and hear what I hear. But if you have great news from your organization that you would like to share with us, I love to hear it. I love to share it with the community, and I love to share it with the people who give us funding to help give you funding. You know, I'm a great way to let them know great things that you guys are doing in the county. And I love to hear and spread it. So please share anything that you feel worth sharing. If you guys raised a little money and you did a project for the community, or a great group of youth came together to do something and you have pictures that you can share, I do like to know about those things and see that we can use in advertising for Charles County nonprofits. So thank you all for the great work that you're doing in the county. We appreciate you. If you have any questions, I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing your applications by October 3rd. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's it for today.